Blog Talk Radio.
Alternative facts.
The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States government. At 12:07 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, numerous unidentified objects of unknown intent and unknown origin were detected at high altitudes over multiple locations of Earth's outer space by the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, and these objects are presumed to be some form of controlled aircraft. It is not known if more of these aircraft will arrive, or if they will attempt entering Earth's atmosphere. United States citizens are encouraged to monitor local media outlets, as more updates will follow as information becomes available. The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States government. Attacks by the undead have been reported in several states across the country. The dead are rising from their graves and are attacking the human race. At this time, it is expected that more attacks of this nature will occur in several other states in the next few hours. The intent behind their attack is unknown at this time. He has been observed that a byte-or exchange of fluids is a method of transmission. This is an extremely dangerous situation if they crave the taste of human flesh. It is not known whether this event will last for hours, days, or even longer. Stay calm, as authorities have been dispatched to deal with these creatures. An all-clear siren will be sounded when this situation is under control. Pacific Standard Time, nor is detected a long-range nuclear missile launch. This missile is believed to be headed in the direction of all residents within a 400-mile radius of this area should seek a fallout shelter immediately.
Welcome to Within the Chaos with your host, Rodney, the Viking Shortridge. I want to give a big old shout out to the Facebook paranormal groups that allow us to post our shows on their pages and helping us to get the word out about all of our guests. If anyone would like to speak to Black Diamond Paranormal Society, BDPS, to discuss your paranormal questions or issues, go to our website at blackdiamondps.org or email blackdiamondps@yahoo.com. As always, our services are free.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. You can listen in by calling 516-387-1922, or you can go to the Vibe Radio Network website at blogtalkradio.com/Vibe Radio Network. For deep within the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for listening to Within the Chaos. My name is Rodney Shortridge, and I'll be your host tonight. First off, I'd like to give a shout out to my cousins up in Ohio, Jennifer and Joe Shortridge of 222 Paranormal. If you get a chance, check out their talk show. You can find them on Facebook under 222 Paranormal.
Have your devices just randomly stopped working? Are you having IT trouble? Not to worry, Mead's PC Repair Shop can help. We also offer IT support too, including website hosting. We are now also offering full event management services. To find out more, contact our friendly customer service team who will gladly help in any situation. Just call 276-880-8900, or if you prefer, you can stop by our shop at 1089 St. Clair Street, Oakwood, Virginia 24631 by appointment only, or by visiting the website at meadspcshop.com for more information. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone, and I had a little week off and enjoyed it. Finally got my garden out, so that was a good thing. But enough of that. Tonight our special guest is author Steve Erdmann. Steve has attended Washington and Webster universities and has written on the paranormal and is highly concerned with the divorce racket and the government conspiracies, and has written for several UFO and paranormal magazines. So let's go ahead and let's get Steve on, because we got a lot to get through. So again, it's my honor to introduce Steve Erdmann. Steve, thank you for joining me tonight, and it's an honor to have you on, sir.
Good evening, Rodney. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, you're more than welcome, sir. The first segment, what I want to start with, I'll start with the paranormal, and then at the end of it, I'll start more into the conspiracies. Is that fine, or is there another way you'd like to go?
Well, it all connects together. I'm 74, and after a lifetime of different events, going back to when I was just a kid, life is a big mystery, and I don't care where you jump into the pool. It's all water, it all connects. And it kind of goes back to the saying, there's no such thing as a coincidence. And maybe we can get into that. Just about everything that happens in your life, it's connected, like molecules and atoms, and there's a mystery about it all. If you just can't be singled out. This is one event in my life. Well, I bet you, surely it's connecting with something else you're not even aware of. So we'll get to that all if you want.
Sounds good to me, sir. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, and how did you get into the paranormal world?
Yeah, that's a good question. Exactly where does that start? I guess sometime. Well, I was in an orphanage. My dad died when I was 10 months old, and sometime around, I guess, 7 or 6, my mom had a hard time babysitting. She couldn't afford a around-the-clock babysitter. She had to go to work, and my 2 older brothers had to work and go to school. So she had an ingenious way of saying, well, if I could just stay by myself until my brothers get home, at work. I was too young to go to grade school. I was, I think, at kindergarten age. And I would get out of the house and run around the neighborhood. I found a way to get out through the kitchen window. And neighbors didn't like that. So eventually I was out, and she had a way to put me in an orphanage for a few years. It's a good babysitting device, and seemed to fit the bill. But I guess even out there as a child, I was seeing strange things, and strange things were happening. But as I grew older, I got interested in the space program, and back then there really wasn't a space program when I was in the orphanage. It was mainly V-2 rockets and atomic bombs out in Nevada. They showed on TV, and on the weekends there was always Space Patrol and Space Cadet, and I was really fascinated by those programs. But time went on. Eventually I went back to live with my mom. I was old enough where I could actually be by myself and then go to grade school. So that solved that problem. And somewhere along in there I started reading different UFO books, Ray Palmer and Cray Barker and Jim Mosley and things, and started corresponding with some of the other juvenile investigators back then. Some of them are grown now, and they're still in the UFO field. Alan Greenfield, Gene Steinberg, they all were kids at one time, and I used to correspond with them. But yeah, somewhere along the line, I had my first UFO sighting, and it was right in my own backyard, and it got me thinking about things, and how do these things happen? And it was very surprising to me. We had gone down to the Fox Theater, I and the next door neighbor and two of his buddies, and then we decided rather than catch the bus going home, it was about 11:30, 12 o'clock, something like that. We just let the bus go on by and we walk. So we kept letting buses go by. Eventually we walked down to South St. Louis, and my buddy went in his house and the friends trailed off to their house. And we had a gangway along our duplex there and a gate, and then on the other side of the gate was a small oak tree. And I was going down the gangway, and that's a bright moon on the other side of the tree. Well, I wasn't thinking clearly. This is after midnight, and at that time of the evening, there would be no moon at that degree in the sky, the level in the sky. It would be almost directly overhead. And I unlatched the gate and walked towards the porch, and I was going to go in the back doorway. And I said, I'll take a look at the moon, see what's... And it wasn't the moon. It wasn't the moon. And my mind couldn't register exactly what was this. It was brilliant. It had like a swept-back appearance, and it started doing gyrations. At first, the thing that popped in my head, as silly as it is, because I wasn't expecting to see it, was a big, huge snow-white dove. And it started gyrating and changing shape and started spinning, and then I just stood there paralyzed almost and watched it just spin up and go straight up into the sky until it went beyond your vision, line of vision. So that was my first UFO sighting. And then shortly after that, I began reading some of Carl Jung's, the psychologist, his theories. He had a book that came out just about that time called Flying Saucers and the Paranormal or something like that. Carl Jung had these theories on archetypes and synchronistic phenomena and what he called meaningful coincidence. And this seemed to fit right in because whatever this was not your classical flying saucer. In fact, I just felt when I seen this thing, it was like everything there didn't seem real. Not just the UFO, but the whole setting seemed magical. It's just like whatever intelligence was behind this owned the night, had full control. And I sat on the back porch for a long time trying to think, what just happened? Well, that made those the things I was reading at the time, especially Carl Jung, made an impression on me, and it kind of was my starting point into UFOs. And of course, years later, we started a group in St. Louis, about '67, and I think at that time I must have only been about I'm taking a guess now. I'm trying to about 13, 14, somewhere around there, maybe 15. When this happened, I believe it was 1960, and the movie we had go down to see was Hercules or Hercules Unchained. They came out one movie a year later than the other movie, and so that might help you pinpoint exactly when it happened. But that was my first UFO sighting, and there's other curious things that happen when you do sky watching. You look into the sky. The next door neighbor and I used to pitch a tent in the backyard, and then we'd sleep overnight in the tent and cook and have a little companionship there. Well, I used to just sit there on the lawn and look at the stars. I'd say, if I look hard enough, will that star move? Well, it would move. And of course the explanation usually it's scintillation. That's where the atmosphere makes the stars jump and jive around. Well, not if that's what it was. The phenomenon of scintillation sure didn't apply, because I actually have seen stars move across the sky, from one point to another point. So that might even be earlier episodes I had. I don't know, but that's kind of my beginning, and just got bigger and bigger as years went on, and of course the teenagers I used to correspond with became grown-ups, and they got into different groups and got more sophisticated in their UFO studies, and then the group we formed in 1967, they had some engineers and scientists in it, and then some average lay people, and it grew, and that had some episodes itself,
Mm-hmm.
I better let you do some talking, huh?
Oh no, that's not about me. It's about you.
Yeah.
Well,
But that was kind of the groundwork for how I got interested in the paranormal. But it's not something you get into. I think we're all just living in it. A lot of the things going on now, the wars and the corruption in Congress, it's all connected. Eventually you begin to say, well, this life is a phenomena itself. It's a strange manifestation of not just paranormal, but it shows a human being. He never really changes over the years. He stays his same. I'm trying to think of a proper word, because everybody will say I'm not evil, but he's a very destructive species, and it seems like he never changes. The technology certainly changes, but that just seems to be a mask for his evil self, and we'll get into that too if you like.
Okay. Well, during all these years and your experiences, have you researched or found any the differences in the types of UFOs that people are reported seeing all over the planet?
Yeah, there seems to be several origins, I think. I don't think they're all coming from one source. I think we've got our UFOs, they're our government, and we start inventing those sometime in the 50s and maybe a little earlier. And, of course, we had the stealth aircraft, which came out in the 80s, and I think they were being mistaken for a lot of UFO sightings. And there's another phenomena, which may be us and may be somebody else. I don't know. The triangular, usually they're black, triangular aircraft, and they're very silent. So that certainly seems to be a real phenomenon. I think they've even had those on infrared film in some of these UFO hotspots. Somebody took some motion pictures of them. So they're definitely something there. But they're not all. If they are manufactured by our government, certainly not all of them are. I don't think what I saw fits a description of an aircraft. It just wasn't some kind of apparitional object. It was very real. In fact, it almost like paralyzed me. I don't think I was in a trance or anything. It just the whole. Some people say when they have a close encounter or something, the whole environment around them seems to change. A lot of them will say, the birds and animals, insects go quiet. Dogs won't bark. They usually bark. Just like the whole atmosphere, the whole situation, it becomes another reality. And I think I experienced that with my first UFO sighting. So, but no, there seem to be different types of aircraft involved, but I don't think they're from the same source. Certainly, during the Second World War, Hitler and the Nazis were experimenting with some experimental aircraft, and I think they were described as circle wing aircraft. They were disc shaped, and I think he had a something like a stealth aircraft. The Harton brothers were inventing kind of like a bomber craft they were going to use to fly across the ocean and bomb New York, or at least that was their ambition. Never came to reality, but they found the Harton brothers aircraft. They got it remodeled in some I guess it's an army base or someplace. They actually fixed it up to its original shape description, So we know that was real. We found blueprints and things that they were working on, flying saucer craft. So we know that was real. How far they got, I don't know. I understand they had some models that did appear successful and was able to get up in the stratosphere. And in fact, I think there was the Nazis even attempted to send men in space in some of their V-2 rockets. And I think it was disastrous, and they weren't successful. But it shows you where their mind was, and what they were capable of. And it's possible that their experiments didn't really stop. Now you're probably thinking, well, they lost the war. We defeated them. There's no more Nazis. Well, quite a few Nazis escaped. I think there's an estimated 10,000 they feel over the globe. A lot of them went to Argentina, and they, as it is, you can't keep a secret forever. They had some archaeologists discover some fortresses down there hidden in the jungle. There's even talk that Hitler didn't really die. The one body the Russians claim to have, they finally got it forensically analyzed, and they found out it was a woman. It wasn't Hitler's body. So they really never recovered his body. And then there's reports and sightings of Hitler when he was in South America. I doubt that he's alive now, but he may very well have survived and did what he could to see that there was a Fourth Reich continuing. And there's been some writers that have written books. Jim Mars wrote a book on the Fourth Reich, and Peter Levenda has written books on the Fourth Reich. So it's very possible that could be one major source of what we're seeing, experimental aircraft that have been continued, not just by the Fourth Reich, but Russia. You heard of Operation Paperclip, haven't you?
Yes,
the Nazi scientists. Yeah. Well, we didn't get all those scientists. Russia got some of them too, and maybe some other governments. But I know Russia got a fair amount of them. We did, and they went into the space programs, and we got Werner von Braun and some other scientists. They went to work in our space program. The question is it the only space program that we had going, or was there other things? They had this knowledge about how to make these craft. Maybe there were other. There was an organization that was speculated that the Fourth Reich continued in, called Odessa, and maybe these were linked up with the Odessa organization. So I don't know. Things like I say, when you connect one thing and the other thing connects to something else, the picture is very complicated, and it's hard to slice the cake in any fashion, because they're all seem to be interconnected. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you have theories on the origin of the UFOs?
My theory is that I do think that they're from other worlds, maybe, even within our own galaxy. I've had experiences, seeing things when I was a kid, and also about 2-3 years ago, about this time, it was during the summertime, me and my mom was sitting on the porch. It was about 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I was talking to her about UFOs. And, she's 70 years old, and she's like, yeah, no, I don't believe in all that. She's like, I don't know why you've always been fascinated with stuff like this. and her house is kind of up on a hill, and we could see over the hills in front of her house. And there was a red light that was slowly going across the hill line, and it was way off. And I said, "Look at that! That right there could be a UFO." And she's like, "That's just the airplane." And it stopped and started going backwards. And I said, "No airplane that I know of can go backwards." I said, "They fly in a big horseshoe." And she's like, it's just the eyes playing tricks and all this. And also, there's this big, like, 4th of July explosion way out there. It was huge. I mean, it lit up all the mountaintops. And I said, "Well, I don't think an airplane does that." And she got up. She's like, "Hell with you. I'm going back in the house."
Was she a believer now?
Yeah, she thinks that she's like, she's like, "I'm 70. I've never seen nothing like that. I don't make no sense. I don't even want to talk about it."
Yeah, it's they're very. I think recently the Navy pilots that came out and said they had some bouts with the strange aircraft and caught them on film, and they kind of are forcing the hand of the government. You can't, like I say, you can't keep a secret forever. But they said that the UFOs they encountered were, could travel at thousands of miles an hour and did all kinds of gyrations. I guess they considered themselves lucky that they even caught it on film, but they did, and that's been released. And slowly but surely, I think the phenomena itself is forcing the hand of the government. Actually, our government, sometime, you're familiar with the Roswell incident, aren't you, in 1947?
Yes, sir.
It crashed, yeah. Around that time, something certainly happened. Around that time, the CIA, Truman, and a few other, I can't think of it. It was invented the CIA under the Security Act, and they became more or less the handlers of the UFO investigation. But because the phenomena seemed so startling and so real, the government, the Air Force, had their own investigation, Project Blue Book. I think it started out with Project Sign, and then that turned into Project Blue Book. But actually, the Air Force's study, Project Sign, was very open-minded. Some reports start coming in primarily around that time, June, July of 1947, and then they had the Roswell incident, which the Air Force come out and said, "Gee, we found one," and then they debunked it the next morning. But they did, the Project Sign did some really good studies of the phenomena, and there was a special report 14 that some of their best mathematicians and scientists were involved in that study, and they said based on I forget what it was, 800 reports or something, they were their very best UFO reports. That it was a mathematical study, but it was done so professionally. They came out with the conclusion that we were dealing with either a totally unknown phenomena or extraterrestrial spacecraft, and they even stated that in their report. And that went on. I think Edward J. Ruppelt was the head of Project Blue Book, and he did his best to be very open-minded. And they were talking about getting instrumentation and scrambling jets. And when they had in 1952, when they had the Washington, D.C. invasion, I guess you would call it, where they were spotted on radar over the Capitol and that, it became a hot potato. I mean, nobody wanted to handle it. So that's when the CIA got involved and says it's causing a ruckus. we're going to have to tone it down somehow. And they more or less took over the investigation. They had set up a Robertson panel, and it seemed like they purposely poo-pooed the phenomena and said, there's nothing to it. And apparently that's when the CIA became very distraught about the phenomena and took over the investigation. And then right after that, I think Project Blue Book turned into a Project Grudge, and the name says it all. They totally was very skeptical of the UFO phenomenon and said there was nothing to it. But of course, there was, and the UFO reports continued, and there's been some very phenomenal reports after that. But that was the beginning of the government's investigation until the CIA stepped in and took over and probably did some of their own. They probably have their own backroom investigations, I guess you would call them, with their own secret personnel and everything, and tell the public there's nothing to it while they investigate. But this latest thing with the Navy, it was bound to happen sooner or later. You can joke. I mean, there's been Navy pilots or military pilots that come out with some pretty phenomenal cases. I don't know how they're going to debunk these, because after a while, the public just says, "Wait a minute, so much debunking, there's something going on here," and I think we reached that point finally, but we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I do find it really hard to believe that that we're all that's intelligent life within the universe, with all the billions of planets and suns and galaxies out there. It just, it was like I was trying to explain to my mom. I'm like, the numbers, if you just run it by the numbers, there's intelligent life out there. And I said, if we are it, wow, how you just really don't understand how alone we really are, if that's true.
Well, you have to define. Here's the problem, Rodney. You have to define what we're really dealing with, because you have to ask yourself if they're coming in Model T Ford spaceships, like you see the kids draw, what they look like a spaceship and they act. They're coming from billions of miles every day to this planet, unless they're stationed here, which in a way I think they are. But no conventional kind of drawing board spaceship type vehicle would even be possible to travel those billions of miles and do it on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes some researchers think they're not your typical metal flying saucer, with the windows and the landing gear and all this stuff. Even though they appear like that, they feel we're dealing with something that's categorically more metaphysical. If they could travel billions and billions of miles, almost like in a blink of the eye, what would they need a spacecraft for? Now, I know a lot of sightings describe them as ships and cylinder craft with windows, and some of them land like something out of the movies, like The Day the Earth Stood Still. I mean, the old version, the old movie, and but that doesn't really fit into a realistic picture of some of the reports, because there's been reports of things that appear as a craft and suddenly they turn into something else. like the UFO I saw. There's some of them that don't even act like aircraft. They're orbs of light, and they when they appear, certain other things happening. That's the whole thing. So many when people investigate a sighting, they don't try to find out what else is going on at the same time. They don't ask what's going on in the life of the sighter. They don't ask, well, what other phenomena was happening at the same time. And I think there was an article written in Fate magazine many years ago, and it's unlocatable for me to find it now. But the person that wrote the article noticed when there's like in a neighborhood, when there's like a UFO sighting, if someone just investigated more broadly, they'd find, well, maybe in the family they had some other phenomena, a ghost phenomena or a poltergeist phenomena. And if they investigate a little more broadly, they probably find neighbors had different things going on in their lives at the time, ghost phenomena or maybe other strange paranormal phenomena. So it just in that case, it just wouldn't have been the sighting of that one UFO. It would have been a panoply of things happening around that sighting, and that's kind of a consensus in a lot of UFO investigators now, that it's just we're not looking at the phenomena with the right lenses. And there was a book written, and I've written some reviews on it, called UFOs Reframing the Debate by Robbie Graham. And he's got about 14 or 13 essayists in the book that give their point of view on what's going on. And they pretty much agree, most of them, one or two almost getting to a debunking phase, but most of them agree that the phenomena is so unusual, it's actually getting into a kind of like the science of quantum physics. Mm-hmm. And it's not your normal phenomena. I encountered that. When I had that UFO group, a group of us had the UFO group back in '67. We started a committee for animal mutilation, because that was going on all over the country, especially like in the western part in Colorado, and we'd send out questionnaires to some of the farmers and that, and get their what was going on. And there again, it just wasn't the cows being mutilated. They also seen strange lights in the sky, and then they had another phenomena. They tried to trace it down: mystery helicopters, unmarked black helicopters usually, or just strange acting helicopters in the area, and they could never trace it down. In fact, we had one of our investigators and myself went out to Lambert Airport and talked to the FAA agent there, and he was nice enough to see us, and we brought that up about the mystery helicopters, and he came right out and said, yeah, we get reports of those all the time, and says, and we can't trace it down. I don't know if he was supposed to say that or not, but he did that afternoon. We saw him. And in the case of the animal mutilation, there again, we talked to somebody here at the Humane Society. He worked for the Humane Society, and we asked him if he heard any rumors or anything. He says, yeah, all the time we're running into animals mutilated, and we're not sure what's going on in that. So, usually if you invest, they usually connect, like I said earlier, somewhere along you connect the dots, and there's dots from all different places, which makes you think that the phenomena is not a classical one solution only phenomena. It seems to be a lot of.
I agree 100%. I agree 100% because I've been researching the paranormal for 11 years, and I know a lot of groups out there, they focus on the spiritual part of it. But, me and one of the guys that was working with me at the time, we had an experience. We was in a park investigating, and it was a paved area, and you could hear us walking because I was holding a recorder as we was going through. For about 20 seconds, it sounds like we went from walking on pavement to actually walking on like the cat beam structures, like in a big warehouse or something. Now, I didn't experience anything. He didn't experience anything or felt anything odd at that time. But we did notice something that night that we seen, an object fly by real quick. It was so quick, kind of thought it was my shooting star or something like that. But I started reading and looking more into this, and this is when I first started. And I do think that the paranormal, like you brought up earlier, as far as hauntings and stuff like that, and crypto, as far as Bigfoot, UFO sightings, I think they're all connected somehow. Maybe some type of parallel universe or something. I don't know. Quantum physics, I don't know. But I think they all are connected somehow.
When you was describing something there, you said it was like the ground beneath your feet changed, or what was it? Can you explain that again?
Yeah. The while we were walking, the sound of our walking, click, 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 because we was walking on pavement. Then all of a sudden, it sounded like we was in a big warehouse walking on a catwalk. It went metal. You could hear the clang, 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 clang for like 20 seconds, and you could hear the echoing, and you could hear the echoing of us speaking in this big area. Then it went back down to us walking back on the pavement, and our voices more tightened back up. It wasn't echoing no more.
Right there, that kind of fits a description of what I was telling you. How the environment itself seems to change.
Yes, sir.
And that would be a clue that when we're encountering things that it's just not mortar and brick or what, I don't know how you put it. Things change, that gets back to quantum physics and how our reality actually is. And actually, you're probably sitting in a chair right now, but that chair is really nothing but energy. And if you got down below the atom level, you find those atoms are about miles apart from each other. It's like looking at the solar system and the planets are so far. Well, that's the way it is with atoms. There's a lot of energy between those atoms, and in fact, they've gotten to a point where they figure that's how a lot of paranormal phenomena occur, because people are able to shift the reality, the substance, the energy that all the objects consist of, and that happens when some UFO encounters. They actually are encountering some energy. Some of them don't even call it energy; they call it information. It's a form of information that's constructing things. So it is very complicated, but most people, your average citizen don't really get into this. It's not what they see on the news or on TV. And their world's just getting up and going to work and coming home and listen to what a propaganda the stations are giving out. That's their world.
Mm-hmm.
But if they, when they do encounter these things, it should tell them, there's more going on here than meets the eye. Our reality, like you just encountered something there that didn't seem quite right, and it told you there's more going on in your life or at that time than you ever suspected. I don't know if was that the only encounter you've ever had like that?
We've had other encounters where one investigation, I was having a really hard time because I kept having bad thoughts in my head, and I'd go outside. And one of the guys went out with me, and we sat there, and I always I'm a stargazer. I love looking up at the night sky, and Clayton did too. And we was just standing there talking, and all of a sudden there was to us, it was a UFO that flew by, and it was quick, and it wasn't like a shooting star or anything like that, because it shot across, stopped, and then dropped straight down, and then shot back up. And I looked at Clayton, and I'm like, how many meteors have you seen do that?
Yeah, see, that's the whole thing. These things are so unusual, and so did you notice anything else going on besides just the UFO at that time? Anything? How the wildlife was reacting, or did you feel you yourself changed somehow?
It did get quiet, which that's you're right. That normally happens. You don't hear no dogs. You don't hear no wildlife or anything like that. And we are, where I live, it's a lot of wildlife, a lot of noise. It did get quiet. Later during the investigation, we heard like somebody walking on top of the house, and we went out. I mean, it's 4 guys surrounded the house and was all looking up, and we couldn't see anything, but we go back in a few minutes later. It sounded like somebody run right across the top of the house again. So we knew something was messing with us, but whether it was paranormal, as far as like a spirit, a ghost, or anything like that, I don't think it was. I think it was something else, but what, I don't know.
Yeah, there's that points up like what I was saying. Usually there's other things going on at the same time, and a lot of people don't connect it. Maybe it doesn't happen the same day, maybe it happens a week later, but it's all connected somehow or another, And in this Robbie Graham's book, the one lady that she's a professor of religion, I think, or something. She points out how in the stigmata of St. Francis, was it? Assisi, the one that had the bleeding hands, and he had another monk with him, a brother, that seen this object come down, and it had like rays of call it rays coming out of the object, and it shot this beam at St. Francis, and that led to his wounds. Well, as somebody pointed out, that's a typical UFO sighting. If it was today and somebody saw that, they would write it up and point out this was an injury caused by a UFO, and that's it shows you how. There again, how many of our religious miracles and how many of our religious episodes, it was St. Francis of Assisi. And
what's your opinion about ancient civilizations? I know I've spoke with a lot of different people that, that do research at the Great Pyramid, and also places in Peru and stuff like that, where they're showing these marks, these tool marks on stones that look like types of drills or lasers that cutting them to be so precisely set upon each other, and weighing hundreds of tons. What's your opinion about? Do you think that could be maybe some type of alien technology, them working with us further back in time?
Yeah, it certainly seems so. I mean, they've had things that even machinists couldn't do today.
Mm-hmm.
It would be very difficult for them to. So I don't know. Our legends probably has a lot of truth to them. But they're very disjointed. They don't give a clear picture, Some of them are more better, Like somebody said on the television the other day. I think it was some archaeologist says we only know 10% of our true history. We still got 90% to discover.
Wow.
So, you know, that's a phenomenal thing to say, you know. And I kind of feel, I don't know how we're going to discover everything if we don't have all the artifacts to discover it. You know, how are we going to get a plain picture of our history if we don't have all the evidence or not able to collect all the evidence? But you're right. There were some strange things going on there, and it certainly seems like somebody, some superior being, came here and either taught us or showed us or did certain technologically superior things, and the evidence, you know, is left behind. And I have to tip my hat to a lot of people like Stitchin and like that. These I don't know if you call them amateur archaeologists, but they sure do their legwork, you know, more so than some professional scientists, which just seem to, they don't want to speculate, you know, they don't want to, but I mean, it's changing if you watch some of the programs on TV and some of the books that come out. Things are changing, and they're not all, we're getting into an age where, like I say, you can't keep everything secret, you know, and there's a lot of things made, but I agree with you. Those, some of those constructions by the Egyptians were phenomenal. I mean, we can't. Some of those stone slabs are so large that we couldn't move them today unless we had heavy-duty equipment, a couple cranes and stuff, just to get them to budge. How did they? You know? So something doesn't jive, you know, with the classical, you know. And then they'll show them more on TV, like the Easter Island statues. They say, well, here's how they were moved. You know, they put logs under there and then they rolled it around, and you know, well, that isn't going to work for some of the Egyptian monuments. You know, it just won't work. You know, they're just too large or just too big, and they were like, they looked like they you. I mean, some of them were smooth, very smooth, and looked like machine surfaces. They didn't do that with chisels and hammers. I mean,
especially in the Bronze Age, that's when they were saying that these were built, and you know, bronze tools wouldn't even chip a piece of granite.
Yeah. You know, but how do you put this all together? You know, there's what this one scientist came out with several books. I think his name was Kumo. Are you familiar with him? Maybe I'm
not familiar with him.
Yeah, well, he's written several books. I'm probably not pronouncing the name right, but he's found artifacts that appear to be, I don't know. Certainly thousands of years old, but everything that he's discovered. Let's see if I can find his name. I got the computer on. Everything that he's discovered, he's talked about, seems to indicate some kind of advanced technological expertise is involved. You know. Far beyond what we can even do today, and no, I find that fascinating, and it all connects somehow or another, one way or another. I just don't know. For one thing is this one essayist in Robbie Graham's book. Was talking about a lot of this scientific advancements are based on our materialism. I mean, our capitalism. I'm sorry, capitalism and materialism, because we're living in a capitalistic society that they have their own rules and regulations, and you know, they only get funding if you stay within the parameters of what what would you say, framework of the capitalistic society dictates. You don't, if you go too off the mark or far afield, they kind of say, no, you're not going to get funding. This university isn't going to get funding. If you're going to go start teaching that stuff. So a lot of it's dictated by our culture. Our culture's kind of the biggest censorship board. They dictates what we're allowed to investigate, what we're not allowed to investigate, and it's kind of sad, really. But that's one reason why a lot of scientists won't go gung ho in different areas or try to think a little bit off the mark because our capitalistic society doesn't really allow it. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to look while I'm talking here. I'm trying to find that guy's name. I got it up here, but I got so many things on my website. Sometimes I picked the wrong one. But it's Kumo. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I had it here real close nearby. But there's been a number of scientists have written books on it. And of course, Stitchin, you're familiar with Stitchin's works about the Anunnaki? Yeah. Yes, I think he's on to something. I think he's on to something. And but I mean, he's not going to get the blessing from the community at large. From what I remember reading about him, they start tearing his arguments down. Well, he was They were the people that wrote those documents, those tablets. They were really talking about planets, and they're not going to open their mind to some other possibilities. They're going to really hold the line. And it takes many years for thinking to change and go to different line of thinking. And I don't know if that's been your experience, but that certainly seems to be what's happening out there.
Oh, I agree. I had a world history professor. He brought up the subject of where primitive man, for 200,000 years were hunter-gatherers, and then all of a sudden we stopped that to be pretty much farmers and working with communities and working together instead of just isolated pockets of a handful of people at a time. And he said, where did this come from? Where did all of a sudden, after 200,000 years, if someone's like, okay, we can grow some wheat, we can grow some corn. He said that just doesn't, after 200,000 years, just don't appear for no reason. He said there have to be a reason to that.
Well, how do you explain some of the, they find nails in fossils millions of years old, or they find footprints, and that is kind of startling. I don't know if I agree with that myself, but they've allegedly found footprints in fossilized mud, that's millions of years old, and I mean, it's a normal human footprint, just like it doesn't seem to be a Neanderthal or anything like that, and they found different mechanisms and things that look like coils and things like that, fossils millions of years old. That would suggest that there had been advanced civilizations millions of years ago. Maybe what's happened, maybe that's what's happened to us happened to other civilizations. They say that might have happened to Mars because they found there's radioactive isotopes there that can only be created. And I forget now what the isotope was. That could only be created if there had been an atomic explosion. No other kind of explosion. It had to be atomic for that isotope to be created. And they speculate, well, maybe the planet got wiped out. They had a huge war or something, and they got bombed by another civilization, and that's how come the radiation's there. That type of radiation. And I wonder if that could have happened here on this planet. you know, because it would seem if there was advanced civilizations, well, we know from some of the legends that when if there seems to be advanced civilizations, they were wiped out, and we know some of it's recorded in different legends. Or the Bible has one recording of it, the flood. So we know that it's possible for civilizations to be wiped out. You know, and there's testimony to that fact. So that could explain some of the things that went on. I don't know how you reconnect all those different missing areas, though. I mean, how do you find all the missing evidence? How do you get reconnected? What scientists they're trying to, but it seems it's not enough to convince the scientific community. You know.
Oh yeah, I've read where in England, Texas, I think back maybe in the 50s, there was a couple that was walking along, found a rock that had a piece of wood sticking out of it, and they kept it for a few years. And their son cracked it open to see what was in it, and it was a hammerhead still connected to the wood handle, and they carbon dated and everything, and it dated back to 500 million years old.
Now, doesn't that kind of suggest something that but how reliable was that test? Do you know?
Yeah. Well, see, the thing was what kind of helped with the test was the piece of wood that was sticking out of the rock, the handle of the hammer. The end of it was actually starting to fossilize to turn into coal. So they at least could date it back 300 million years. I was like, wow.
You remember what magazine or what program you saw that on? I'd like to look that up myself and use it.
I think I seen that on YouTube because I watch a lot of YouTube to, get ideas and theories from different people and their stories and stuff. But I think that was on YouTube.
Yeah.
But if you get a chance, look that up. That's awesome. And it also showed. I can't remember where it was located. I think it was Russia, a coal mine that actually looked like a wagon wheel up in the roof of the coal seam, where it had fossilized. And apparently the government came in because it wasn't just one. I think there was 3 or 4 of them they found, and the government shut it down.
Yeah, I imagine they would do something like that. Yeah, I mean it just it goes against the grain, and well, then not only that, maybe they feel threatened by it. Like if they're getting funding, they're getting, they just feel threatened by it. That's the way it is with the UFO mystery. That's why the CIA kind of took over everything in Project Grudge, and certainly if they found some aliens in 1947, and that kind of makes me wonder what type of aliens we're dealing with. That's why That's why I say it has to be from different sources, because I don't know. They all seem to blend together. Sooner or later, you got to come back to the paranormal, because even when the Nazis were the Third Reich, they believe in paranormal phenomena. In fact, Hitler based his whole Reich on almost a form of a religion. Some say satanic religion, but their use of slogans and practices, and even when they were into UFOs. In fact, they allegedly discovered a UFO in the Black Forest, a crashed UFO, and that led to a lot of the technological advances they had. But Hitler and the Reich were into bizarre phenomena, religious phenomena, their whole cult. The whole approach was a cult. So even if we have, and then how far back do you want to take this? Back if you go back to the Egyptians, they had they claimed to have learned a lot of their religious beliefs from the gods, supposed from the gods. These are the same gods that taught them how to build monuments and taught them how to give them different advancements and things. So I think if you're going to eventually get to the bottom of some of this, you're going to find a lot of it is psychic or paranormal, one way or the other. Where they were physical beings, they were part of their advancement, part of their growth, evolutionary growth, was to have knowledge of the paranormal. It probably was second nature to them, And in fact, a lot of UFO researchers now, like the book I mentioned to you, there's Robbie Graham. Most of those contributors to his book, they've come to the conclusion that our science needs to have new lenses. We gotta start getting beyond the borders of our old conventional ways of looking at things, because it's going to happen anyway. Especially now with quantum physics, it's going to happen. We're going to learn different things, and it seems almost like. Are you familiar with Jacques Vallée? He's a UFO researcher.
Yeah.
He's come to a conclusion that he feels that the importance of the UFO is not so much seeing these lights in the sky, as to how it's leading our science along, how it's opening new vistas for us, causing us to think in different ways than they normally do. And I kind of agree with that. People that get involved in this field, they may start out believing they've been contacted by green men in spaceships and spacesuits and that, and maybe they were in some way or another, but apparently these creatures or this reality has a very broad framework that it works in, encompassing a science much further advanced than we can even imagine right now. And I think that's one of the reasons the UFOs are here, is to open new vistas, make us think of these new advances, ways of thinking.
Well, in your opinion, what do you think the world governments know? Do you think they know all the answers to questions that, you, me, and all these other researchers and scientists have been proposing about, space travel, ETs, ancient civilizations, especially all the things that they have found, and they hide it?
I don't know if they have it necessarily, but I think they're much further along in what's going on than we suspect. I think a lot of this was happening out of our vision, so to speak, and we didn't even realize it. Some of this goes back centuries with different philosophers and inventors and things. They were probably receiving. They probably were in contact with this other reality, or receiving information from this other reality, and leading to their inventions and things. And that just continued on like that over the centuries. But it probably wasn't our choice so much as it was this other realm, this other dimension, took it upon theirself to contact us and lead us in certain directions. give us new science and new ways of looking at things. Maybe they were always in.
That reminds me of Tesla, his story.
Yeah, he's one good example. And Da Vinci is another good example. Yeah. I think somehow these people were more or less. Well, it certainly can happen if you seek out this other dimension. It's more likely to happen to you. But sometimes it just intrudes on person's lives, despite what they want. They just the person has a spectacular UFO sighting, maybe is abducted or what appears to be an abduction, and but these people, their lives become phenomenally changed. They don't seem to be the same after that. And this was brought out in one case back in the 80s, was it? Dale Spar, he was a policeman. There were a number of policemen involved where they chased for many hours a UFO, and then after that he started getting debunked. I mean, he wrote a police report up, and the other policeman wrote a report up how this thing just led him around for hours, But then after that, his life seemed to change, but for the worse, I guess. I think he ended up having mental condition and got fired, and I think he got divorced, So it certainly had an effect on his life, but in a bad way, And that seems to happen to a lot of people that get involved with this other dimension. They don't always turn out for the best,
Mm-hmm.
Have you experienced anything?
I'm sorry.
I say, have you experienced anything like that in your life?
Anything?
Well, because of your interest in the paranormal, do you feel that things kind of took control, but for the worse sometimes?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, especially the region I live in, people are interested in this stuff, but they don't really like talking about it. And you have someone like me, I'm a very outspoken person anyway. And then when I start, speaking my ideas, my thoughts, my theories about things, then I tend to get shut down and shut out. And I've had a lot of, health problems and stuff in the past 15 years. So yeah, I would say, yeah, it does affect you negatively. It can, and it does. I've known other people that are in this field of interest, and they have financial problems ruined, or family turned against them. So I do see it can work very negatively against you.
Yeah, that's probably for several reasons. Probably because it goes against the grain of a lot of thinking, a lot of people, and the fact that it's the phenomena itself is so earth-shattering, that it affects your life personally. That's seems to be what happens to a lot of people that are involved in possession.
Mm-hmm.
I investigated this one case in 1949 of a boy that was possessed. I don't know if you may have heard of that. In fact, Peter Blatty's book, The Exorcist, was based on this story, partially based on it. And that boy, it was in Washington, up there, Maryland, up in Maryland. He became involved in poltergeist activity, and then eventually he had relatives here in St. Louis, and they came down to visit his aunts and friends, and then the possession really took a grip of him, and he was put into Election Brothers Hospital down here on Broadway, and they brought Father Bowdern in because they didn't know what to do. Didn't seem to be anything that they did that seemed to help. And the boy had an exorcism, which was successful. And I wrote an article. In fact, back then, that was back when the movie came out, The Exorcist. I got really interested in it, and I read a news story where it mentioned some pastor that William Blatty, the author, tried to get a diary from him. He was talking in his religion class how he had a diary from the priest that were involved in that, and he approached him, and I think the priest refused at first, and I think eventually he did get a copy of it. So here's this father's name, Gallagher, Eugene Gallagher, and I wrote him a letter. I said, I'm thinking about writing some articles on this, I says, can you contribute? So here he sends me in the mail on onion type typing paper, real thin paper, a carbon copy of the Exorcist Diary, or one version of it. I think there's about 3 versions of the diary, where the priests are named in there. But what he did, because I guess he felt guilty about divulging that much information, he took a pencil, I guess, and crossed out all the names. But it didn't help. I mean, his intentions probably were good, but you could hold the paper up to the light and then see what the names were. So I knew who the priests were. I contacted some of them in St. Louis here, and most of them wouldn't cooperate, But based on that diary, I wrote an article for Fate magazine and said, this is the actual diary, and and then I gave some history of the case, and that's how I got involved in that. I got an article of that on my website, on my WordPress 507.com website, and people can go there and look at it, see the history of The Exorcist. I got in a debate with another guy here in St. Louis. He was a critic. First, I thought he was going to be a fellow, kind of a congenial fellow investigator. Turned out he was just getting information from me on the case and wanted to debunk it, And so he got a website, and he really was a crass kind of guy. He really tore this guy. Now the guy's almost 80 years old, the boy, but he was really tearing him down, saying, "Oh, this is crazy," and he was molested by his aunt and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I felt bad that I even cooperated with this guy, so I wrote my own article to kind of clear the air, and it's on my WordPress. Can I give that site in case somebody wants to?
Oh, yeah. You can give out any information you'd like to give.
Yeah, it's a WordPress site. You can find that at https://wordpresscom507.wordpress.com, and that'll bring up all my articles. And one of them will be the Cracking the Demon Critics, I think is what I called it, kind of based on my debate with this guy, conflicts with this guy, and presenting the other side of the story. And that's a good example how the phenomena can get involved in your life to a detrimental effect, because the source of this phenomena is not something we've got a handle on. We got a number of scientists now at different universities that are coming out with more and more information, experiments and things that establish this as a real phenomena, this energy. It's not so much like it's an energy. They're starting to call it just an information framework. Everything that gets into the quantum field is a form of information, and you read that term quite a bit if you get articles where they talk about we're nothing but a computer virtual reality. The universe is just a computerized invention, rather than a creation, and but your average person doesn't think along these lines, they just read what they get on the news, and a lot of it's bad news or disinformation. And eventually, I guess these pilots that have got this documentation on videos of UFOs, eventually somebody's gonna come out and say, no, they're a bunch of crackpots and this and that. It always happens, It always happens, But,
well, what are your you're concerned about a lot of government conspiracies. So, which ones would that gives you the most concern?
Right now, it's just stuff over Trump, the deep state, and I just feel it's a sad situation the way human beings operate, the way they treat each other, and you don't have to be a big politician or head of a country to show this type of thinking. Just your next door neighbor, or maybe somebody in your family, they operate the same way. This is the way human beings operate. This stuff that Trump's trying to expose now, that he was shanghaied. They try to do a coup on his election because they wanted to stay in power. And there's the politicians on that and involved in that deep state coup. It's probably been operating for years. When I don't know when this stuff begins or when it ends, or this is just the way human beings operate. It probably goes back to before World War I. Probably goes back to the Civil War. The way human beings try to stay in power, how they try to keep control, and just this don't have to be just on the political level. It can be on the human level, the way family members treat each other. We're just stinkers, and that doesn't seem to be getting any better. You see it in the UFO field, with the debunking and the ridicule, and you see it in religion. A lot of what's going on is what I call masking, narcissistic masking. We like to put on a front, we'll get up there and preach about goodness and have a religion or a doctrine. One good example is Scientology. Here's they got even tax exempt status, billions of dollars coming in, but the way they treat their members, it's ridiculous, and it seems to be as a money scam, and they're hiding behind a religion that this L. Ron Hubbard invented, and he's got a history too. I mean, this guy, L. Ron Hubbard's even got a history. It goes many years before the invention of that religion, before he came out with Dianetics. But a lot of religions are nothing but masking that hides the real thoughts of the progenitor. They'll get up and they'll preach it. These are the ways to practice a good life, and this is how you should treat your brother and all that, and then actually live a life of evil to more or less a certain degree. And you can always get forgiveness for this, confess your sins, and then the next day you're free to go and do it again. And sometimes twice as bad, There was a movie with Burt Lancaster called Elmer Gentry, and he was a guy that went around preaching. He was he really could fool people with his preaching, and but he lived like the devil, That's was one of the themes of the movie, and it's called Masking, and it's a shame that we see it today. I'm not going to blame the Democrats or the Republicans. They're both politicians. They gang up in clubs, organizations, and they call themselves, well, I'm a Democrat. Or they gang up in a club and they say, well, I'm a Republican. They're humans. They're humans. And they won't go any further than that. And they're masking what's really going on. Now, right now, it seems like Trump's got a handle on some things. I wish him the best if he can expose it. He's come face to face with it, and that may be a little heroic. I don't know, but the Democrats, if you watch one news station, it's the exact opposite of what the other news station is. The one news station will be pro-Republican, and they do their best to make Trump and the Republicans look good. The other station takes the exact opposite. Whatever the other station says, they're going to take the diametrically opposite and say, they're out for what's good, what's just, what's right, And the trouble is, they're both human beings. They're all stinkers. The one, I think that where you really see it is in the extremes. Mm-hmm. And at one time, the Democratic Party supposedly was against. Against ultra-right-wing politicians and bullies and tyrants and that, and they were for the common person. At least that's how the propaganda went. And they probably were to a large degree. I think a lot of them were leftists because they were the most that seemed to be against tyrannical politicians. And then the right usually kind of gravitated towards the rich, the very, very rich, the super rich. And the super rich always knew best what to do for humankind. They because they're rich, they were pure, they were right. And they had these two extremes. Usually the left, those on the left were poor people, or people that couldn't advance because of different oppressions. And the ones on the right got to where they were by oppressing people, keeping them under their thumb. So these are two extremes, and they show up in the two parties more often than not. But a lot of it's so hypocritical, because the Democratic Party we have today is not the Democratic Party 10, 20, 30 years ago. It's not the same. They change. At least the propaganda changes. Their characteristics change if the propaganda doesn't. Okay, for the downtrodden person, how come there's so many millionaires in the Democratic Party? How come so many of them work for the goal of getting all the much money they can and say, we're for the poor person? Well, something doesn't add up there, right? Mm-hmm. You look into the backgrounds of some of these even some of the TV announcers make fabulous money, and they're all for the left, the Democrat. And of course, on the right, it's a given. These are rich people, but they know what's best for us. They know they got there the hard way, or this way, or that way, and because they got this much money, they must be right. So the sad truth of the matter is, they're all humans. They all work in gangs, clubs. Call them what names you want: Democrat, Republican. They're same old gangsters, gangsters. And we got to live with this mess, But it's the same thing, Take it on whatever level. But you don't have to have it on a national, global, elitist political level. You can come down a few rungs, Some of these other organizations. Some of the charities, There's more. I even heard that during the Second World War, right after the war, that the American Red Cross helped some of the Nazis escape out of Germany. You know, something doesn't add up there. You know, so I think basically, and you can even bring it down a few other levels. You know, how we treat each other, how one family member treats another family member, how we're all masking behind some of our own evil intentions, and it's hard. It's hard, you know. I mean, to realize that we're all pretty much the same, no matter what we do or where we come from. This is the way we are, the way we operate, and of course, here's where the paranormal comes in. Some of these saints had something happen to them despite themselves, like St. Francis of Assisi. He had this object that descended out of the heavens and wounded him with these stigmata wounds, and his life changed. He became a saint. And it takes something like that to knock us out of our mask, you know, to get us to realize there's something more going on than we're willing to accept. And but we do it. We all do it. We always have a mask. On Facebook, some of the political bickering that goes on, it's really sad. It's really makes you feel that things are hopeless, you know. But the name calling that goes on, all in the name of politics or doctrine or religion. Some of the name calling, well, I'm right, I'm 100% right, you're 100% wrong, and back and forth, back and forth. And what they don't realize, it's the same as Pogo, the cartoon character, said. Pogo said, I saw the enemy. I know who he is, and it is us. Mm-hmm. So until we get to that realization, here's another example of masking. The portrait of Dorian Gray, the man that he was committing atrocities and killing people, but he had this portrait that was I guess a magical portrait. I'm not sure how that story goes. And he said that every time he would commit a crime, his portrait would show his true image. And it started out to be a pretty nice portrait. But every time he committed something, maybe I think a murder or something, the portrait would get uglier and uglier and uglier. So he kept it hidden up in the attic. And it's kind of like that's another version of masking, you know. He appeared to be a handsome young gentleman, but his true self showed up on that portrait, you know. And that's another version of masking, you know. I don't know what would bring most people. Maybe that's one reason we're encountering this other dimension, to knock us out of that masking, to show us, to give us some realization of the way things really are, you know, or at least get us to confront it or think about it, you know. And of course, that just there's other ways of explaining that. If you want to get into things like Carl Jung and different psychologists, Carl Jung seemed to really have a handle on it with synchronistic phenomena. There's another example of synchronistic phenomena that seems to indicate something paranormal is actually going on. Have you ever encountered synchronistic phenomena yourself?
Not that I can remember, that I can recall. No.
Well, you probably have. You just didn't make a note of it, or it wasn't striking enough. But you probably have. And I'll give you one example. I was a boilermaker for 17 years, and then I got into other professions, and even had my own business. But at the time, after 17 years, I lost my job as a boilermaker, and I was out looking for work. And I had gone out to a furniture store out on Big Bend and put my application in, and I was just feeling low and crappy, you know what I mean. And I'm driving back into town on Big Ben, and I turn the radio on, and it's old Kenny Rogers singing, "You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille," right as I pulled up to the intersection of Big Ben and Lucille. And that's what you call meaningful coincidence. And you probably have a number of incidents like that in your life. You just never really realized it at the time. But some of them are pretty startling, pretty striking if you read any of Carl Jung's books. There was one theorist or UFO experiencer. I think his first name was his last name is Selin. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. He had written a book on owls, how he experienced the synchronistic phenomena with owls, and it'd be a chain of events. He'd see whenever he experienced a paranormal phenomena, or even his friends, an owl would show up, or he would see an owl and it would turn into a UFO.
Wow.
And for some reason, he's written a book on it called Messengers, I believe it's called, and where I wrote an article on it. I find it on my website, where he had a whole series of different events, but it all seemed to center around owls in one way or another, and that seemed to be like synchronistic phenomena. And I think it's Cullen. I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name. Clellland, I think. But there's a number of the UFO field, even the paranormal field, is just filled with different synchronistic events, and I recommend people writing down coincidences. Like there are no such things as coincidences. They all have meanings, and it probably. If you think about it, you'll probably find some stuff that's happened to you in your life like that. But it's all part of the same framework, the same phenomena.
Okay. Well, what's your opinion about the Illuminati and the New World Order? Fitting into all this, into the conspiracy also.
Yeah, there's families. There's they call blue bloods. Families that go back centuries. Actually, there's a whole list of different organizations. The Luciferians, Society of the Snake, you name it, and they go back centuries. Secret societies. And Bill Cooper. You remember Bill Cooper? He wrote, Ride a Pale Horse. I just got an article published by him in a magazine. In fact, I think I got it right here. It just come in the mail today. New Dawn. I don't know if you heard of New Dawn. It's in their volume 13, number 3. I wrote an article. I've written a number of articles on Bill Cooper. It's on my website, the one I gave you. And this one was on Bill Cooper. He had a number of synchronistic events. And it got so concrete that a lot of people refer to him as a prophet, like a modern day prophet. And this is on page 53 of my article. It's "Behold a Pale Horse: The Rise and Fall of America's Greatest Conspiracy Writer." And Bill Cooper, essentially his prophecies brought the worst down on him. He prophesied 9/11, and he even prophesied that people were going to blame it on bin Laden, and it came true. And then he prophesied that because of his exposing a lot of this stuff, he's going to end up dead on his own. He says, one of these nights, they're going to come to my home and shoot me right on my doorstep. Well, he made that prophecy 2 months when 9/11 happened. He made that prophecy 2 months before it actually happened. And the sheriff department, because he was getting into different what do you call it? When you debunk the government a lot, when you become a crusader, and he got into the tax evasion movement because he didn't feel we should pay taxes, because that began as a temporary voluntary thing, and it even says you may pay taxes, you may not, and that was back in around 1911, something around there, and then it became out to be a enforced tax, but he figured, well, no, I'm going to try to practice it as it was originally intended, as a voluntary tax, and he said, I'm not going to pay it no more. Well, that was one of the excuses. They had planned to take him down anyway, and sure enough, they had a secret SWAT team, I guess you would call it, came up to his house, was going to entrap him to come out of the house, and they were going to arrest him. So they paraded as a bunch of trespassers. He was trying to keep trespassers off his property, and he came out. They had hoped he was going to come out on foot, and then they were going to grab him and take him down. But he come out on his truck, and he told him he thought they were really were trespassers, but they were in disguise. He said, I'll give you 10 minutes to get off my property, or I'm calling the sheriff. So he tried to go back in his truck to his house, but it had just stormed real bad, and he lost control of the truck, and they were wrestling with him in his truck. So he figured, he couldn't drive the truck because I think he had like a small crash. He said, I'm going to run for the house, and I'll call the sheriff on these guys. Well, he didn't make it. They wrestled with him, and he could see they had guns, so he probably thought they were gangsters, crooks.
Yeah.
So he started firing back at them, and unfortunately he hit one deputy, became paralyzed. But then they really opened fire on him, and he, just as he predicted, he died right on his doorstep, shot, just like he predicted. Well, he predicted a lot of things. He predicted 9/11. He said, they're going to try, something's bad's going to happen. He said, and I'm blaming on bin Laden, but don't you believe it. Don't you believe it. Well, then, guess what? 9/11 happened. So this is here. His life was all filled with synchronicity, all kinds. And plus, he had his own UFO sightings, and he had a number. He had men in black. He had some people visit him and try to threaten him, take him down, and he had eventually he had an accident because of all this being stalked. He had an accident where he had to have his lower leg amputated, and he figured this type of tyranny was taking place in America, and it was getting worse and getting worse. And he eventually, when he came out of the military, because some of the things that he saw while he was in the military, he had a high security clearance, and he was able to see some files of an admiral, secret files. And at one time he did believe, here again, shows you how people's viewpoints change. He stopped believing that the UFOs were extraterrestrial, and he believed there was some kind of invention on the part of our government, based on what he saw in Admiral Clary's files and other things that happened to him. So he had a radio program, just like you got, and he started speaking out on things and getting a little tougher with the government, and until finally it came to that bad end. And I'm looking for some quotes here in the article that would kind of point this all up. Here's one quote. He said, "Like it or not, everything is changing. The result will be the most wonderful experience in the history of man, or the most horrible enslavement that you can imagine. Be active, or advocate the future, abdicate the future is in your hands." Let's see, there's a couple other quotes. It says, long before anyone was talking about the red and blue pills of the Matrix, Bill Cooper was warning of mass social engineering on part of the New World Order. And let's see. I'm telling you to be prepared for a major attack. Something terrible is going to happen in this country. And he said that in June 2001, before the 9/11 happened. And he pointed up other things like the Waco Massacre and Ruby Ridge, and where the government just gets so heavy-handed at times, so sadistic actually, but they want control so badly, they'll go off the range, and like at Waco, I don't know. They just had to prove their power there. They had to prove that they were going to take control and be right. I don't know if that Koresh was the most perfect guy in the world, but it was their religion, whatever they were teaching there, and they weren't bothering anyone else that I know of, and that's the way it came down.
Well, if Bin Laden wasn't responsible for 9/11, then who was he assuming or knew that was responsible for it?
Oh, he pretty well said the government. Yeah, he just didn't say. He just said they're going to blame people like somebody like Bin Laden to cover it up. And in the case of Oklahoma, the Oklahoma bombing, he believed they were going to have a patsy there too. And of course, we know who that patsy was. And this just seems to be the way the government works. And we can see it today way with the deep state and how they it doesn't seem to get any better, Rodney. It just seems to be getting worse. I know we know how to make all the shiny toys, the supersonic, super swift aircraft and all the special inventions, but the basic human element, the id monster of the human personality doesn't change. They just keep trudging along doing the same dirty things they did ever done, And
makes you wonder how much human or mankind can keep doing what we're doing without destroying ourselves.
Well, we may have done that in the past. Sometimes I suspect there were several big tragedies in the past that we brought on ourselves. And one of my favorite writers is Joseph Farrell. He's written a number of books, and he wrote several books. I picked out 3 of his books, and I wrote a trilogy based on the 3 books, and they were about the Fourth Reich, and he traced. I think one book was Nazi Fourth Reich, Nazi International. The other one was the Nazi International, the Nazi post-war plan to control finance, conflict physics. That was in 2008, and then he wrote another book called Covert Wars and Breakaway Civilization. That was in 2012. And then he wrote another book called Hidden Finance, Rogue Networks, and Secret Sorcery, the Fascist International 9/11, and Penetrated Operations. That was in 2016. He's got another book out. But he pretty well broke down how, as a elitist movement, the Nazi movement continued on after the war, and again was involved in probably helping to set up, along with the Nazis in America. We got a Nazi background ourselves in America here. It's not just because we wave a flag and call ourselves the best country on earth doesn't mean we got all good people here. But he believes they were behind the 9/11 explosion, as well as other different. A lot of people had their fingers in that. Powerful people that wanted to enrich themselves, and people that wanted to take control and scare us. A lot of people had fingers in that. Not just Nazi regime. But that goes back to the fact that Hitler didn't come out of the thin air. A lot of big corporate power, military-industrial complex power that Eisenhower talked about, financed him. You got Standard Oil, IBM, Xerox, Ford Motor, you name it. J.P. Morgan, they helped finance Hitler. They gave him the money to rise. They wanted to see him rise. So, when did Nazism really begin? I mean, we know something 1939 or something, 38, it had a beginning. Yeah, sure. But who behind the scenes on a global basis were the financiers? And what are the financiers doing now?
But wasn't the church also involved? One of the financiers with Hitler?
Yeah, there was a whole line of them. I used to have them written down here. In fact, if you just on the internet just type in "who financed Hitler," and you'll see all kinds of sites come up, and they'll say, "Yeah, this is how he got his money for this. This is how he got his money for that." And the curious thing about the 9/11 explosions, Farrell points out, if it just was a normal thermite type thing, where did all the radioactive elements come from? Strontium, a lot of very strange atomic materials, as if more than it would just be from a thermite explosion. He calls it a vast cyclotronic technology, and it was involved. Here's this. I read from my article here. It says, Farrell talks about the true nature of this breakaway civilization. Oh, that's another topic, the breakaway civilization, that could coordinate psychological operations on a truly celestial cosmic scale, whose lust for power of all kinds is virtually boundless. Manipulation systems of a planetary scale. As the technological capacity of emulation grows, so too does the scale of financing and secrecy. Yeah, there's a number of X funds that this organization used to finance their operations. Mysterious X funds, and some of it seems to be almost like derivatives. Now they're using X funds to finance based on a planetary scale. You know how the derivatives is almost like an invisible money. People take bets saying, I'm going to finance this based on the proposition that this company is going to do better, or we can later have this financed by our X funds, And they feel there's actually a planetary derivative based on prospective discoveries in space. Asteroid mining, or now they're talking about a secret space program, which probably has some merit. The alternate civilization, this society, this group of people, whatever you want to call them, operate outside the scope and boundaries of nations. They control what nations are doing and how they will operate. And Farrell here's the quote. Farrell sees 9/11 as the ultimate deep black magic, an alchemical wedding of high technology, mega ritual, and subconscious group mind of the masses. Farrell quotes at length researcher S.K. Bain's exposure of 9/11 as ritual magic. The twin towers of the Masonic pillars and
I'd like to apologize for everybody. Last night's show with Steve, we kind of got disconnected about 6 minutes before the show was over. And it seems like every time that I have a guest on that might be discussing about conspiracy theories, we either have these technical problems at the beginning of the show where we can't actually have the show, or we're cut off somewhere midway to near the end of the show. So to apologize to everybody and let you know that I'm going to try to have Mr. Erdmann back on as soon as we can, and because I feel like we just scratched the surface of what we were discussing last night. But I'll go ahead and play the end of the ending to the show, and also let everyone know that next Thursday night, June 13th, our special guest will be the Motor City medium, Rebecca Smunk. And I hope everyone has a great weekend and be safe. Love you all. Take care of yourself. That's it for us tonight. I want to thank everyone that took the time to listen in. I'd like to give a big shout out to the Vibe Radio Network and to Ryan for putting up with us. Also to all the first responders and our men and women in the armed services. Thank you for your service and the sacrifices that you and your families make every day to keep our great nation safe. Tune in next week to another exciting show starting at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Everyone can go to our Facebook page Within the Chaos, and don't forget to like our page to see upcoming guests along with past shows, postings, or you can also go to my website at www.blackdiamondps.org or blogtalkradio.com/Vibe Radio Network. Also, we have a YouTube channel, so go to YouTube, look up Within the Chaos for past shows. Thanks again. Until next week, everyone have a safe weekend and have a good night. And love you all. Be careful out there.
I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. the hate of men will pass, and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!